Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Board Games Hitting My Table. This is where I talk about all of the games that I have been playing over the last couple of weeks. This episode covering the second half of October 2023. Now before I get started on the games I have been playing, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's start with the biggest game of the bunch that I've played, and this is Newton. So it's been a while since I played Newton. We played a two-player game on pretty short notice. This is a really well-rounded Euro by Nestor Mangoni and Simone Luciani. One that kind of flies under the radar really, considering how popular Luciani is as a designer. But it's a card-driven kind of engine builder. As you're travelling around this map and visiting these different locations, trying to correspond that to what's on your personal board, and then trying to fill up these bookshelves to get these kind of ticking points, like areas to get more points coming in each round. Really interesting design. I love the hand management here, as each round you have to tuck a card under your board, lose its ability, but permanently make that particular action stronger. Now, for the first time, I introduced some of the expansion material, which I think is actually incorporated in the base game now for the newer versions of the game. But it introduces these kind of cards with the double symbols on them, or even these reversible ones, where if you play them in certain locations, you can get like quite a strong ability when you do that. Really enjoyed it. This is one of those games where, this particular play was one of those games where everything just seemed to work out in my favour. Whatever I did just seemed to slot together like clockwork, and it kind of worked out for me, and I ended up doing quite well, which was quite surprising considering I haven't played it in such a long time. But it definitely did kind of reconnect that itch to get some of my favourite Euros back to the table. So yeah, really enjoyed my play of Newton, and really couldn't recommend this one enough. Played some smaller games with a complete non-gamer, and these are ones that, basically, this person had never played any modern board games, so I thought I'd introduce her to a couple. Splitter, this is a nice little roll and write one. Couldn't be simpler, as you are just basically rolling a pair of dice. You're writing the number of one dice on one side of the sheet, and then on the other side of the sheet you are reversing it in the mirrored side. So if I show you a sheet here, and what you're essentially trying to do is you are trying to create groups of the same number. So you want 5 5s together, you want 2 2s together, 4 4s together. An immensely frustrating game, particularly when it comes to the later turns, because you end up kind of messing up your previously built patterns. But I really enjoy it. It's really quick. It's probably nothing to write home about, but I do like that little gimmick of the mirrored numbers. Also played Nalia. So this is quite interesting because I got absolutely demolished. By someone who'd never even played it before, because I am really bad at this game. But this is a little puzzly style game, as you're placing these cards that are divided up into 4 quarters, and you're trying to build these patterns out and try to score as many points as you can corresponding to these public objectives, which change round after round. So if you're familiar with games like Cartographers or games like the Isle of Skye, this uses the same variable scoring as that, but still enjoyed it. It's quite funny that I actually got quite badly beaten. And the final game we played was Heroba. So it's been a while since I played Heroba. This, I think, was one of the hidden gems from last year. Now, a lovely filler game. That's actually a variant on the Sudoku game, but it's competitive. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to control these regions by these different control markers. But it does have Sudoku rules, so you cannot have the same number in the same row or column, or the same box or garden in this example. And if you have the most control, you are going to get points equal to the size of that garden. But there's a twist on it, where if you put your lower markers next to these koi fish, then you can double your points in another region. So it does have a really cool conflict. There's some good blocking. Just a very, very smart game. And it really reminded me how much I enjoyed this one. So yeah, definitely glad I kept hold of Heroba. Played a game of Hanami. Played a 3-player game. Love this little filler game. Another one that's definitely flown under the radar. I generally seem to do quite well at this game, but I don't think I won this most recent one. Basically, you're trying to build out these columns of cards, and you get 3 columns, and each card you draft you draw, basically you draft 2 each round, you can only place the cards higher than your highest card or lower than the lowest card in each of those columns. And as you can probably imagine, because of the spacing between the cards, you cannot always slot the cards you want into these into the places that you want, and you can end up blocking yourself out of placing these cards at all. Really enjoyable game. It's so fast. I love the scoring, where the first round only 1 colour scores, the second round the first 2 colour scores, and then the third round everything scores again, but the points increase as they go. So it's quite an interesting pacing to this one, but still one of the best filler games I have in the collection. We played a 3-player game of Caesar's Empire, one of my favourite games, again from last year. Consistently hits the table. A lovely little kind of route building game with some great player interaction. I think if you like games like Ticket to Ride, I think this one's this one's way better in my opinion, but I think there's some good crossover between the two. And all you're doing in this one is you're trying to put your little kind of military units on these roads, and then you reach a new city and you get these different tokens, and they count towards set collection in a bunch of different ways. But the cool mechanism here is that when you place, or when you reach a new town, you trace the route back to Rome, and for every unit that you pass through, whether that's yourself or another player, they get a victory point. So there's lots of piggybacking off of each other. And this most recent game we played was very interesting because you could see how we've got better as a group playing it, because when we first played this one, we were letting people run away with it, kind of creating these really strong routes that were hard to counter-react really. But the most recent game we played was a lot of blocking, a lot of kind of min-maxing, and this is definitely one of those games that has some depth there, and that starts to unravel the more you play it. But this one's going from strength to strength for me. For such a light game, this one might be kind of one of my favourite games in relation to how light it is, if you want to put it that way. But yeah, an amazing design that again sadly didn't really take off as much as it could have, because this could be up there with the Ticket to Rides in terms of an introductory game to modern board gaming. So that is Caesar's Empire. I played a 2-player game of World Exchanges, a very interesting little flip and write style game, or it's more of like a draft and write, with an economic edge to it, as you are trying to basically manage this little kind of cash flow sheet here. By buying and selling these different locations. When you sell in certain times, you're going to get certain bonuses or a little increase of cash. You're trying to reach all these symbols, and you're going to multiply these symbols by the buildings that you own at the end of the game. There's a bit more to it than that, but this game certainly has a unique identity to it, and it does feel distinct to anything else I have played. And it's a really nice one by Emperor S4. I'm not sure how well the distribution is at the moment, but I picked this one up at the Games Expo last year. And yeah, it's become a real welcome addition to my collection, and again, a lovely game that you can play in about 20 minutes or so with some good depth there. You don't really get too many economic style games that play well in 20 minutes, half an hour, and this one certainly does that. So that's World Exchanges. Check this one out. I don't think you'd be disappointed. I played a 3-player game of Forever Home. So recently reviewed this one on the channel. This one is a puzzly, abstract style game, as you are placing out these dog tokens on your little sheet here, trying to build these patterns according to these cards. When you build the patterns, you're going to get points, but you also get to resettle the dogs in these different scoring zones, which will correspond to these cards that will score you points based on the type of dogs you're rehoming, getting set. Maybe you want pairs, maybe you want certain types of dogs or different types of dogs, that kind of thing. A remarkably well-balanced game. The more I'm playing this, the more I'm starting to see how every kind of path to victory here is viable. There's a very viable strategy to go for a rush strategy. At the same time, if you very carefully manipulate your board to adhere to these kind of endgame strategies, then you can do well that way as well. A real optimization puzzle that plays so quickly. You're talking about 20 minutes, half an hour to play this one. Great punchy gameplay, and yeah, this one's probably one of the surprises for me this year, because it wasn't really on my radar. The publisher very kindly sent it to me, and I've been enjoying it. So that is Forever Home. Speaking of games from this year, and another game that I have recently reviewed, this is Dragon Keepers. So I played a 2-player game of Dragon Keepers. This is like a kind of a set collection style game, or a shedding style game, as you are collecting these dragons and you're trying to play these dragons, trying to correspond to this book here. So the book is actually the reverse side of the decks of cards that you're drafting from. So you can see here in this example, I want to play 5 green dragons, or if I revealed this card, it'd be 1 green dragon. And I love the different scoring options here, because a bit like Forever Home, you can go for a lot of different strategies. Do you want to pace yourself and go for these higher tokens? Do you want to rush and take these lower tokens, but get the best gems that go inside those tokens? There's lots of conflicting mechanisms here. Good player interaction, some good turn angst. Check out my review if you want to see more of this one. Now, I do think I prefer it at that 3 or 4 player count, because it's a bit more interactive and you can't quite easily determine what people have in their hands. But it still works really well at 2, and it plays so quickly. And yeah, this one's going to do really well on my top 100 this year, I'm sure. I played a 2-player game of Acropolis. Acropolis, a lovely tile placement game that actually did a good job of replacing other games in my collection. So this one replaced games like Miyabi. This one replaced Cascadia for me. It really is kind of a one-stop shop. And even it has a bit of King Domino involved as well. So basically you're building out your little city here by placing these kind of hex tiles that are 3 connected with each other, and all the different colours have different scoring criteria, but you also have these multipliers that you're buying as well. And what I love about this game is the 3D aspect, because you can lay tiles on top of other tiles and get bigger multipliers for doing so. And I actually used that probably more than I have ever before in this most recent game. Very early in the game I was building on my 3rd level, which is not the easiest thing to do. I ended up doing quite well through the temples actually. So normally one of my primary strategies is to just build up a huge network of these blue residential buildings, which you're just trying to connect as many as you can together. But I thought, let's try something different. I really did pile on those temples, and that ended up actually paying off quite big. So it's quite interesting to see you can go for these different strategies and do well. So yeah, this one's just such a breezy game. Again, a bit like Caesar's Empire, I could see this one being an evergreen gateway game for sure. So that is Acropolis. Also played a classics. We played, of course, a 2-player game. This is a 2-player game only of Lost Cities. So Lost Cities, one of the games that I'm probably the worst at in my collection. My win rate of this game is absolutely horrendous. And this was no different. I lost again, but I actually put in a good performance this time. So annoyingly, basically I did really well on all but one of the different types, and that pretty much half my score. Because if you're not familiar with Lost Cities, it's a hand management style game as you're building these columns of cards in numerical order. But as soon as you commit to one of the colours, you actually have negative points, and you're trying to chip away at those negative points and go into the positive points the more cards that you play. And I did well on all of them, as I said, apart from one of them where I ended up playing these multiplier cards and then not reaching the 20-point threshold, and ended up costing me a whole lot of points, and costing me the win ultimately. But it's a classic. I love the back and forth between the hand management and what you're giving to your opponents, because you can't go back on yourself. This is just, it's an evergreen. There's a reason why people consider this a 2-player classic, and I completely agree with that. So that is Lost Cities. Nice getting that one back to the table. Excuse me. On to another 2-player only game now. We played another game of War Chest. So War Chest, probably the best game that I've played this kind of this calendar year. So this is like an abstract style game. I'm not going to get everything out here. As you have these tokens of these different military units, and you're maneuvering them around the board, trying to claim these different zones and shed your little claiming tokens. But all the different units have different strengths and weaknesses, and you have a lot of them as well. So there's lots of replayability here. And with the expansion, that's amplified even further. Now, I think I've not been beaten at this game yet, but I managed to, I always distribute the powers randomly. all the different units randomly. And this game that we played most recently, I thought, well, this is it for me. I've got no chance of winning this, because I wasn't too happy with my arrangement of troops. And my opponent had such a great complementary bunch of troops. Like, for example, they had these foot soldiers, which can have twice as much presence on the board. She also had these, I think it's the bishop, that can only be attacked or can't be attacked by bolstered units. And they had the knight as well, which can only be attacked by bolstered units. So all of my units were pretty much useless against one of the units they had. But I tried to do what I could, and I really focused on my crossbowmen. So I was the only player with any ranged unit on the board, and I thought, let's focus on my crossbowmen. Let's try camp in the middle of the board and pick off units as much as I can, and hopefully kind of win in a war of attrition, I suppose. And that is kind of what played out. I think a big part of it was that my opponent didn't commit and really push for, or basically back me into a corner, which I think they could have done. They're a bit too defensive, I think, and that ended up costing them, because again, I could just keep on getting these crossbowmen into my bag, taking little pot shots, and chipping away at their strength. But this game is a masterpiece. I think it is fantastic. And yeah, I mean, I wasn't even sure if I was going to like this, because I'm generally not a fan of these rigid abstract style games. But this one is so engaging, and that has that perfect balance of that determination as well as the randomness of what tokens you're going to have in your hand, and even a bit of deduction trying to work out what your opponent has in their hand as well. So yeah, a fantastic game, and I always enjoy my plays of War Chest. And the final game out of these that I've played is Forest Shuffle, another game from this year, brand new release. Reviewed this one on the channel already. Absolutely adore it. A really interesting set collection game where you have tons of sets building on each other, and some good drafting mechanisms as well, because you have to pay for cards with other cards, but the cards you've paid with go in a common display, which can be picked up by the other players. I love that little twist on this one. So check out my review. Every game I've played this I love, and I don't even have concerns with the balancing, which some people seem to have. So make of that what you will. I think it's a fantastic set collection game. So that's it. That's all the games that I have been playing. I'm not putting up rankings on this video, if you've noticed that, because I will be releasing my top 100 very soon. And I think I might do it a bit differently by putting it all in one video. So it's going to be a longer one, but I'll of course fly through these pretty quickly. If you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.